Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into something pretty interesting. How do you even start to estimate the market size for fully automatic driverless cars?
Right. Specifically in the USA, looking ahead to 2030.
Exactly. And we've got this source excerpt that lays out one particular way to tackle that number.
Yeah, and it's quite specific. First off, it defines the market size just by the number of users,
Not dollars, okay, just people.
just people. And it's strictly about fully automatic cars, the kind you don't drive at all.
Right, not the driver assist stuff.
No. And it's for personal use, setting aside, taxis or delivery fleets for this count.
And there's a big if baked in,
A
right?
huge one. It assumes the tech works perfectly and it's all legal by 2030.
Okay, so given those constraints from the source, what's the basic idea? How does it approach figuring out who's going to be using these things?
Well, what's fascinating is where it starts. Not with the tech, not even consumer surveys, really. It starts with economics.
Economics, you mean like who can actually buy one?
Precisely.
Yeah.
It asks, who can actually afford this kind of, well, pretty high-end technology, especially early on?
Huh, that's an interesting angle. So how does the source use that affordability idea to build an estimate?
It tries to ground it in household finances.
Yeah.
And it uses luxury car ownership as a kind of stand-in.
A proxy.
Yeah.
For being able to afford an extensive new tech like this.
Exactly. So the source starts big picture. U.S. population, maybe 330 million, assumes an average household size of 4 people,
Okay.
which gets you to about 80 million households across the U.S.
Right, 80 million households. So where does the money filter come in?
It then slices up those 80 million households by income. Top 10% high income, next 20% upper middle, then lower middle, then low.
It's segments.
Pretty standard. But the core assumption here, the thing that really drives this first step, is that only those top 2 groups, high income and upper middle, could realistically afford these cars by 2030,
Viewing them as luxury goods, basically.
at least initially.
So how many households does that leave you with in that potential pool?
Well, the source explicitly calculates the top 10%. So 10% of 80 million is 8 million high-income households.
Okay, 8 million.
And it mentions the upper middle group could also potentially afford them, maybe even multiple cars per household in these top tiers. But the key output here is identifying that initial pool, starting with those 8 million deemed financially capable.
So this whole first part of the method is really about narrowing things down. From everyone to just the households the source assumes have the financial muscle.
You got it. It's setting an economic ceiling based on income and sort of existing luxury spending habits.
Right. It establishes the total addressable market based purely on that financial capacity filter.
Precisely. But
Yep.
importantly, this isn't the final 2030 number. It's just the pool of potential buyers based on this income lens.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a starting point grounded in, well, economic reality as the source sees it. So once you have this pool of potentially wealthy households, what next?
Right.
How does the source's method get from that group to an actual number of users in 2030?
So from that base, the method then layers on more filters. The source talks about needing to estimate what percentage of those households,
The affluent one.
the affluent ones, right, might actually choose to switch from their current fancy car to a fully driverless one by 2030. It considers factors driving adoption within that specific group.
And how does that get you to a number of cars or users?
The source explains you then project some kind of growth rate for adoption in that segment and to get an annual market size, like how many are adopted just in the year 2030.
Okay.
The method involves calculating annual purchases. It uses something like the typical car lifetime value, basically how often people replace cars, to figure out the yearly volume within that slice of the affluent pool that's adopting.
What's fascinating here is how this specific method builds the estimate. It's a very particular viewpoint, isn't it? Starting almost counterintuitively with just who can pay for it.
Yeah, using that existing luxury car ownership as the main clue before really digging into maybe broader appeal or infrastructure issues.
So this method gives us a starting point, a number based fundamentally on financial capacity. It's figuring out who could buy one based on income and what they spend on today. Kind of a top-down approach, filtered hard by economics first.
That sums it up well.
So what does this all mean then? This estimate we've looked at really zooms in on who can afford luxury today and projects from there. But thinking beyond just income, what other factors do you, listening right now, think will be the biggest drivers or maybe the biggest roadblocks for people actually choosing to adopt fully automatic driverless cars for their own personal use by 2030?